nice. Yeah. Okay. Let's move on now to think about the general strategies that you need for the speaking test. So the first one is, when you hear the question, listen carefully to the question that the examiner asks you. Listen carefully to the questions. Point number 2, if you are not sure about the question, you can ask for the examiner to repeat it, okay? So you can say something like, can you please repeat the question? Or can you say that again, please? Or I didn't quite follow, or something like that. So there's no problem asking the examiner to repeat the question. What happens if there is a word or a phrase you don't understand? So if there is a word you don't understand, you can ask the examiner what it means. This is quite important, because if you are asked a question early on and you don't know the meaning of one of the important words, it could really influence what your answers are going to be like after that. So it's important that you do understand the questions that the examiner is asking you. Okay, everyone clear with those features so far? Everyone clear? Am I speaking the right pace? All good? Okay. All right, so you can tell me, Herco, what part of Santiago did you live in? I lived in Puente Alto. I don't know if you know Puente Alto. Okay. Okay, cool. All right, so the next strategy is keep speaking until you see that the examiner wants to move on to the next question. What this means is, you know, the examiner is not asking you questions because they're interested really in your answers. They are actually trying to gauge your level of English. So the more you speak, the more the examiner can grade you or assess your speaking ability. So if an examiner asks you a question, don't give them a short answer. Keep talking, give them as much information as you can, all right? Point number 2, don't be afraid to self-correct if you make a mistake. So even native speakers do that, right? We do that when we're speaking in our own language. We make mistakes. So if you make a mistake when you're speaking, it's perfectly okay if you understand the mistake and then re-say the word or the phrase so that it's correct the next time. And another strategy is use as much variety in vocabulary and grammar as you can. So this is important because when we look at the band descriptors later, you'll see that you are marked on vocabulary range. How many, you know, what is your range of vocabulary? Do you know a lot of different topics? And you're also marked on the grammar. And that means the range of grammar structures you know how to use, such as tenses, such as modal verbs, such as complex sentences or compound sentences. So the idea is that you are always trying to show the examiner how much you know, and this is going to cause you to sometimes make mistakes. So do you think it's better to say a lot and make some mistakes, or do you think it's better to just use very simple language? I don't know San Ramon, so I don't know exactly where that is. You think it's better to speak slow, all right. So that can be important sometimes. Whether you speak slow and still take some risks when you're using your vocabulary and grammar is also okay. But many people are afraid. They're afraid to speak too much because they think that they're going to make a mistake. I want to encourage you to forget that fear. Do not be fearful. It's better that you speak more and take some risks and make some mistakes when you're speaking. Okay. Let's move on now to think about how I'm going to be marked. How is the examiner going to mark me? All right, well, there are 4 categories. The first one is fluency and cohesion. Fluency and cohesion. The second one is pronunciation. The third one is grammar. And the last one is vocabulary. Okay, so let's have a think about what each of these means. Fluency and cohesion. What does fluency mean, do you think? Anybody want to type in the box? What does fluency mean when you're speaking? Correct. Don't stop, all right. Correct. Okay, so to keep speaking without pausing. Yep. Flow. Yep, that's right. So fluency is about speaking for a longer period of time than just simple short utterances. So basically, fluency is something that you gain when you are speaking the language often and you have lots of practice. So if you've been in New Zealand for 1 week and this is the first time you're speaking English, then you will have very little fluency. But if you've been in New Zealand for 5 years and you speak English every day, your fluency will be wonderful, I would say. Okay, what about cohesion? Cohesion. Cohesion is referring to what when you're speaking? Anybody know? Not sure? Cohesion, cohesive devices, cohesion, things like such as, yes, continuity between the ideas, very good. Linking words, very good, that's right. So we can also know them as discourse markers, but a lot of the time they're referred to as just linking words. Okay, so linking words, we're going to have a look at some soon, but basically cohesion is basically how your ideas flow. Is it easy for the examiner to follow what you are saying, right? So are you using words which indicate to the examiner what you're going to do next, what you've just talked about? Do the ideas link to each other in a way that are cohesive? Okay, so obviously I'm sure everyone knows what pronunciation is, and that's quite a big category of features. We're not going to look at pronunciation tonight, but we are going to look just at fluency and cohesion. Grammar, of course, is the structures that you use and the range of the range of structures that you are able to use correctly. And vocabulary is also to do with the range of words that you use. Any questions at the moment? Any questions? All good? Oh, good. How are you doing, Anil? Can you hear me? How about you, Jaspreet? Can you hear me, Maulik? Ruchi? Russ? Yeah? Yep. Okay, cool. Great. Where are you from, Ruchi? That's an unusual name. India? Okay, it's a really nice name. I like it. Sorry if I can ask you male or female? Female, right. Okay, I wasn't sure. I didn't know. Okay, let's move on. Let's move on to the first part of the speaking test. It's called Part 1, and it is personal information about you and your habits and your opinions, all right? So a lot of the questions are going to have you in them. Now, there are lots and lots of different topics in Part 1, lots and lots and lots of topics, but here are just a few of them, and they do change I can't tell you how often they change, but the topics do change so that candidates are not sharing too much information. But obviously the more common topics would be food, the type of food that you like to eat, the type of food that's typical in your country, your sleep habits, what you do on the weekends, what sort of movies you like, different habits such as what you do every morning, what you do every evening. Hairstyles sometimes is a topic, relationships with other people in your family or your friends, what you talk about with your friends. You might get a question about transport. There are many, many more topics. We've had bags, gardening, holidays, etc. So the topics do change, and they can be on anything. Once we even had a topic on hats, believe it or not. Okay, so has anybody done the speaking test and they'd like to share with me maybe a topic that they were given to talk about in part 1? Yeah, okay, yeah, I know that topic that's a really nice topic, isn't it? It's good when you get a topic that you're interested in. Yeah. Okay, so for IELTS General and IELTS Academic, it's the same questions, same speaking format, hobbies. Okay, yeah. So there's loads and loads of different topics that you could get asked. Sports is another one, correct. All right, so let's take a look at an example of the questions in part 1. Now, there's usually 4 or 5 questions for the first topic in part 1. So remember in part 1, it's divided into 2 parts. You have the general information about where are you from and what shall I call you, and then they move on to a set of questions. And in this case, we're looking at the set of questions, which is friends. But if there is time, they will give you another set of questions, okay, which is about a different topic like hobbies or sport. So this is what we're going to look at now. Some of the questions are nice and easy to answer. Do you have many friends? Look at the language here. Do you have? What tense is that? Do you have? Present tense. Okay, do you have many friends? Now, a lot of the time the examiner is going to ask you why. Okay, so do you have many friends? Yeah, it's present tense, so that means now. Do you have many friends? So the examiner might say, why? Why do you have many friends? And so then you've got to extend your answer and you've got to add information. So Malik, why do you have many friends? Can you think of a reason? Ah, good, because I'm so friendly. Yep, that's a really good reason why you have so many friends. Okay, so from that comment, Herko, you can then move on to say, why you're friendly and where you meet new people and so on. So there's lots more you could say. But as I said to you in the early part of the session this evening, one of our strategies is this one, number 2. Okay, so this is the one that I want us to focus on just at the moment. Remember that you can keep speaking until you see that the examiner wants to move on to the next question. All right, does that make sense? You're not going to talk and talk and talk and not let the examiner ask another question. You need to be looking at their body language, their eyes, are they wanting to move on to the next question, and you have to be ready to stop what you're saying so that they can ask the next question. All right, so on one hand, you're talking as much as you can, but on the other hand, you are looking at the examiner to see when he or she is wanting to move on. Is that clear for everyone? Okay. All right, so question number 2, how often do you go out with friends? All right, so this is more about what how often you see your friends and go out with them, and why not. You might go out with your friends once a year, right? And there would be a good question to ask, why do you go out with your friends once a year? So you can expand on that and give the examiner more information. Okay, question number 3. Tell me about your best friend you had at school. So what tense is this one asking you to use? What tense? All right. Okay, good. So this is the other thing that you need to be careful with, is that sometimes we don't always hear correctly, but if you're not sure, you can ask the examiner to repeat the question. But here they're wanting you to show how you can use the past tense. Now, the question is in the past tense. Tell me about a best friend you had at school. So what language are you going to be? You're going to be saying things like, when I was at school, I had a good friend who used to go. So you can use the phrase used to do something, right? So use more than just simple past constructions. Do you know another way of saying used to? Starts with W. Okay, so if this is a new construction for you, it's the word would. It can be used in the past tense to talk about what you used to do. So for example, yep, and usually, that's right. So in the past, we can say things like, we would go to the park every weekend. We would go to the park. So it's like saying we used to go, and it's with some frequency that happens. All right, so another question here, back to the present tense. How friendly are you with your neighbors? That's right. Yeah, nostalgic. Okay, so now the question here with the present simple test. How friendly are you with your neighbors? Why not? And then more of an opinion sort of question, which is more important to you, friends or family? Okay, so some of the questions are about doing things, and some of the questions are about thinking things. Is that clear for everybody? Hello, Christine. Welcome, Christine. I've just noticed you've come in. All right, great. So these are examples of some of the questions in part 1. I just want to go back and show you that. This part 1 is about 4 minutes long in total, so that includes 2 sets of questions. So you can imagine that maybe these questions are going to take approximately maybe 1 to 2 minutes. So they're quite brief questions, and you're going quite quickly through these questions. So your answers need to be quite short but relevant. Okay. Okay, let's move on to think about what happens after part 1. We move on to part 2, which is the long turn, and this is 2 minutes long. This is 2 minutes that you need to speak for. So you are given a question, it should be a question with 3 to 4 sub-questions to answer, and you have 1 minute to prepare, and you can make notes. All right, so you're given like a card or a booklet. It looks, okay, so these days we're handing out these kind of booklets. They're about A4 size, and it's just handed to you. So you take it and you read it. You mustn't write on it. So you have 1 minute to prepare what you want to say, and you can make notes on a piece of paper. Okay, so it is a question plus 3 or 4 sub-questions. So here the main question is, describe something you own, which is very important to you. Describe something you own, which is very important to you. And then we have some sub-questions that you can include in your answer. Where you got it from, how long you have had it, what you use it for, and explain why. So you've got a bit of a variety of language that you need to use. So in the past tense, you'd be saying where you got it from, how long you have had it. So this is present perfect tense, what you use it for now. Okay, and that could be, you could be using the passive voice for that question, and then explain why it's important to you. Okay, so you'll have to talk about the topic for 1 to 2 minutes, usually more 2 minutes than 1 minute. You have 1 minute to think about what you're going to say, and you can make some notes to help you if you wish. Okay, so this is exactly what you would get, except the topic would be different. Or maybe you would even get the same topic. Okay, any questions? All good? Okay, what happens if you get a word that you don't understand? What's going to happen if you get a word that you don't understand? What can you do? Ask. Okay, how would you ask that question? You can say, what do you mean? All right, so you can say, what do you mean by? You can also ask the examiner what, you can say, can you please explain the word own? All right, and they would then say it in a different way for you to understand. So you can definitely ask the examiner about any of the keywords in this part here. I guess once you understand the question, then these sub-questions will be easier to follow. So you don't need to really ask any words from this part. It's really just the main question here that if you're not sure of anything, you can ask the examiner. Okay. Sorry, I think I have missed one moment. Okay, yeah, sorry, right, so we're up to part 3 now. So this is just a general overview of the different parts to the test. So now, just very quickly, part 3 is a dialogue with the examiner. So that's question and answer, it's the comments as well, and it's 4 to 5 minutes long. All right, so these questions are about the topic you spoke about in part 2. Okay, so they're not personal questions about you. They are general questions. Now, if you can't answer the questions in a general way, because your level of English is not quite up there, then you can answer these questions about yourself, all right? Because it's better to say something than to say nothing at all. But generally, part 3 is to really show what language ability you have, okay? Because you're not going to be talking about yourself. You're going to be talking about more general things like what people do in your country, in your community. So you're talking about other people and other people's opinions. Okay. All right, now we're going to have a look at what's called the band descriptors, the marking descriptors. So if you're looking to see where these are, you can find them on the internet. Just look up band descriptors for IELTS speaking, and there is a public version there. Which is, I'm just going to show you what that looks like. They're very easy to find on the internet. Now, it's not overly clear, but you can see that there are, as I mentioned in the beginning, there are 4 categories. Whoops, sorry. No, I'll try that again. So category 1, who can remember what category 1 is? What's the first category? What's the first thing that is going to be marked? Fluency, okay, so fluency and cohesion or fluency and coherence they've put here, but it's the same meaning. Okay, and the second one is lexical resource. What does lexical resource mean, do you think? I gave it a different word. Vocabulary, good. All right, then grammatical range and accuracy. So that's obviously to do with grammar. Yep, it's lexical vocabulary. And the next one, grammatical range and accuracy. So we're still looking at category 3 here, which is grammar and accuracy. And the final category is pronunciation. Okay, so there's a variety of things that they look at for pronunciation. But tonight, we're just going to be looking at fluency and cohesion or coherence to see what we need to look at if we want to get a band 6 or higher. Okay. So we're going to have a look now at fluency and cohesion or coherence, as it's also called. So if you see here, band 7 is what you need to do to get a band 7, then a band 6, and then a band 5. Now, don't forget that these are only a portion of the overall mark because there are 4 categories. So if you take a look at a band 7, so what you would need to do is you would need to speak at length without noticeable effort. What do you think this means? Speak at length without noticeable effort. What do you think it means? Yes, that's right. Speak easily, be comfortable speaking. It shows that you're able to speak for a longer period of time. Yes. Can speak fluently. Yes. Yes. Okay, all of those answers. So speak at length without noticeable effort or loss of coherence. What does loss of coherence mean, do you think? When you lose coherence, what does that mean? Okay, all right. Well, it means that the examiner cannot understand, without connecting the right words, without right connecting words. So it basically means that the examiner is thinking, I don't really follow what that person is saying. Somewhere they have broken down in their communication and I can't follow anymore. Yeah, so basically the language that you're giving is not clear. It's not pronunciation. It's not about grammar or vocabulary. It's simply about how you are connecting all your language together and your ideas together. Okay, so if you're able to do that, then you are going to be able to get a 7 for this point here. Okay, the next point is to may demonstrate language-related hesitation at times or use some repetition or self-correction. Now, this is really important because when you're talking, even in your own language, you do hesitate, right? And you do self-correct and you do repeat, right? In our own language, we do these things already. So it's perfectly normal to do it in a second language. You can use hesitation to think, okay, which word is going to be good to use now? So we're not expecting you to have this perfect language going. We are also expecting you to have some pausing, some hesitation while you're thinking about words. All right, or even self-correction or repetition. So you are allowed to do that for a 7. The last one is to use a range of connectives and discourse markers with some flexibility. So let's have a think now about that. What does a connective mean, and what is a discourse marker? So let's just think about connectives and discourse markers. Can you give me an example of one? What's an example of a connective? We looked at them earlier on. With and okay, not quite. So we looked at connectives or linking devices before. So they are words or phrases. That's right. Words or phrases which are connecting ideas together, such as in addition, or for example, furthermore, examples like that. Discourse markers, it's just a very fancy name, a very formal name for, the same kind of thing about which connectives are, which is just adding information or clarifying information or giving an example. Okay, so all of these features, if you are able to do those three features well, or if you are able to speak at length, if you can use a range of connectives and discourse markers, then you are likely to get a 7 in fluency and cohesion. Now, obviously, it will depend on your topic, and it will depend on how nervous you are or comfortable you are. So sometimes people normally can speak quite fluently, but in exam conditions, they get so nervous and they're hesitating and they're pausing and they're forgetting what they want to say. And so their mark can come down to a 6 in this part because they're simply, not at their best. But if you are going to get a 6, then you would be simply doing all of these things, but a little bit less. So you would be still speaking at length, but you may lose coherence and you may have repetition, self-correction, or hesitation. All right, and in terms of connectives and discourse markers, you can still use them, but maybe not always appropriately, right? You might not use them in the right way. You might make a few mistakes with your cohesive devices, with your linking words. Are there any questions at the moment? Okay, good. Okay, good. Now, for those of us, or those of you who are perhaps just a little bit less fluent and a little bit less confident when you're speaking, if you're aiming to get a 5, what you have to do here is you need to maintain the flow of speech. Okay, so you need to keep speaking, but you will probably be using some repetition and slow speech. Okay, so you'll be doing repetition, self-correction, slow speech, just to keep going. All right, that is one of the features of a 5. You may also overuse certain connectives and discourse markers. So that means that you might use something like and or in addition too many times, and it doesn't sound natural. So basically, if you're overusing any of these connectives, it can actually bring your mark down a bit. The last feature is to produce simple speech fluently, so that's simple sentences, but when it comes to more complex communication, that means that you have a few more problems and you're stopping a lot more and you're pausing to think, oh, okay, how do I say that? That seems like a complicated sentence. All right, so mainly for a 5, you've got simple sentences, some flow, some repetition, sometimes slow speech, but all of these things are much more noticeable than a 6 and a 7, obviously. What they do with that, what they do there is they're going to be listening to all of your speaking parts 1, 2, and 3. And what happens in part 3 is as the questions get harder, they're able to kind of know whether or not you're sitting around a 7 or a 6. So part 2 may not be enough information for them to grade you. That's why we go on to part 3 and then give you more opportunity to speak. So in part 3, if you don't do as well as in part 2, obviously they're going to be looking at part 2 as how to get your assessed mark, if that makes sense. So basically it's a bit like an average of everything that you're saying. Does that make sense, Herko? Yeah, okay, cool. Okay, so I mentioned before about getting a band 6 for fluency and cohesion. So you will need some discourse markers. What's a discourse marker? Somebody give me an example. A discourse marker is the same as a connective or a linking device. Do you remember them? Such as, for example, in addition, furthermore, all those ones. Okay, you're allowed some hesitation. Yes, however is one. Yes, you're allowed to self-correct, and you're allowed to have some repetition. All of these are allowed in a band 6 for fluency and cohesion. Okay, so just another slide to show you what discourse markers are. They're words or expressions to help the listener follow what you are saying. Okay, so I'm just using one now. I'm saying so, right? So, in other words, do you understand what I'm saying? Do you understand everything I'm saying at the moment? Yes? Okay. All right, good, good. So let's take a look at some examples, and I have circled the ones which are more academic. Remember, we do want to try and have more academic or more advanced language if we can. So here are some examples. You may want to take a photo now of this screen. The screen has got some good language that you may want to memorize for linking devices. So we have in the first category, we have linking devices which refer to cause and effect. As a result, because, consequently, hence, since, so, thus, therefore, accordingly, until. I have put a circle around consequently, which means as a result. So consequently is a really nice word to use for as a result, and it's kind of an academic word as well. Okay, so for comparison, we've got likewise, similarly, equally, as with, compared to, equivalent to, and I have highlighted or circled similarly, similarly, similarly. That's 4 syllables, similarly. All right. So all of these, you know, you don't need to know all of them, but you do need to be able to describe a cause and effect, and you need to be able to use the right linking word. So when it comes to contrast, there's lots available. You might just want to use although or but. You might want to use nevertheless or on the contrary, whereas or in contrast, but I have highlighted conversely. I like that one, conversely. It's quite academic. Okay, and obviously I haven't done one for addition. So when you're adding extra information, you can just use something like also or and. In addition, moreover, to, further, furthermore, again. Again is quite a nice one. It's not used very often by foreigners for some reason, but if you want to, you know, add a little bit of variety, you can use the word again to add in extra information which is similar. So this is for adding information. For examples, I have highlighted specifically. specifically, which is a really good way of giving an example. Your most common one would be for example, or for instance, or in other words. I really like the one specifically. Okay, for conclusions, you might just simply want to go with in conclusion, or to sum up, or overall. All right, so I'm just going to choose overall because I quite like that one and I use that one a lot. So, okay, anybody want to share which conclusion type of linking word they use a lot? At the end. In conclusion. Finally. Okay. All right. Well, let's just have a look then at what you guys have suggested. So we're thinking about conclusions. All right. So to conclude what you have already said. So the list here is quite short. So when you're saying other words such as, I'll just mention what maybe Maulik has said, at the end. Now this is actually not really a conclusion type of phrase. At the end is more about sequence or time. Okay, so for example, at the end of the session, I can answer questions. All right, so can you see that the adverb at the end is more about when something happens? Does that make sense, Maulik? All right, and Christine, you said finally. It's also a little bit like time, finally. So we finally reached our destination. Okay, so that's not quite the same as saying in conclusion. So finally is more about a time adverb. Okay, when it comes to time, we've got a lot that we can choose from, and I have highlighted initially. Amelie, bottom line. The bottom line is quite a useful expression, but it has got some specific sort of situations that you would use it in. I wouldn't use it exactly the same as in conclusion. It's really a good one to have, but you have to just be a little bit careful about when to use it. So when you it might be more appropriate, Amelie. Okay. All right. So having a look at time connectives. There's a lot here, and all of these ones here are specific to different situations. Okay. So Christine, you were talking about finally. It would probably go in this category as well. And you can see that it's a different category from conclusions. So I've highlighted the word initially. What do you think initially means? At the beginning, yep, to start first of all, right, initially. So I'll give you an example. Yeah, okay, so tonight I initially thought that everyone could hear me when I started speaking, but it turns out that nobody could hear me. I had some sort of problem with my mic. All right, so initially means in the beginning, or at the beginning. Okay, so these are all linking devices or connectives or discourse markers. There's lots of different names for these things, but they all mean the same thing. Okay, so in my opinion, it's really good to memorize a few for each, so that you can use a bit of variety. Any questions at the moment? Okay. Nope. All right, so we're going to have a quick look at a transcript of a student, a candidate who actually got given the topic of weather. So they were asked to describe a kind of weather that they liked, and they needed to say what kind of weather it was, what they usually do during this weather, how this weather affects their mood, and why they like this type of weather. Okay, so a nice easy topic, kind of weather that they like. All right, so now we're going to go through and have a little read, and I have put in red our connectives, our linking words to help the listener follow what they are saying. Okay, now this is a transcript from a student, and there are mistakes. So this is not a perfect transcript. There will be grammar mistakes and vocabulary mistakes, okay? But it's just a way to show you how they have used the connectives. So we'll start with, well, I enjoy low temperature weather because it is a rare event in my city where I live. You know, since our city is near the equator, so it's really hot and humid during the year. Therefore, I always look forward to December when the weather is cooler and a little bit cold or windy. It's my time. During this weather, I usually love lying on the bench in my garden, watching the sky and sipping my hot coffee. Okay, so they have a few cohesive devices there. They're nice, but they're simple. You know, they're not complicated, but they're, you know, at this point we would need to hear more so that we can maybe, you know, think about giving them a higher score than a 6. So here comes the next part of the transcript. As I can do what I can't in the dry season, I'm always like on cloud 9 whenever this cold comes. I enjoy doing all the stuff under this kind of weather, especially with my mother, such as planting trees, looking at the clouds passing above me, and going out without wearing a jacket. I think I never get bored about the cold due to the fact that it's very comfortable to work and study. So there again, some nice cohesive devices. They're simple, but they're adequate. Okay, simple but adequate. Carrying on, they say, besides, when this type of weather turns up, it means that an interesting series of holidays will come soon, like Christmas and New Year, which are the time for family. So here they've used the word besides, which means in addition. Are there any questions at the moment? Okay, so it brings us pretty much to the end of our session tonight. There's just a little summary quiz here that I'd like you to do. So it's 3 questions that I'd like you to fill in the missing word. So the first one is, try to keep something until you see the examiner wants to move on to the next question. Yes, good. Speaking. Try to keep speaking until you see the examiner wants to move on to the next question. Okay, good. Show the examiner how much you know, right? How much you know in terms of vocab and grammar. Good. Ask for clarification if you are not sure about something. Okay, great. All right, fantastic. So at the moment, I'm happy to take any questions or maybe some feedback about how you think this lesson was tonight. Was it something that you already knew about, or did you learn anything new tonight? Would you like to share your thoughts? Good, that's good, Herko. So you're feeling that you maybe know where you are sitting, whether you're a 6 or a 7 or an 8 or a 4 or a 5. Okay, no problem. Okay, thank you. Ah, good, great, Malik. Thank you. That's good. All right. Yeah, Christine, you did come a bit later. So where are you from, Christine? Oh, okay. Right. Nice. Yeah, Brazil. Okay. Great stuff. Okay. Thank you, everybody. So I'm going to, so if there are any questions now, you're welcome to ask me just quickly. You're welcome. Any questions? I'm not quite sure when our next lesson will be. It will be next week, but it won't be Friday because I'm going to Christchurch next Friday. So it'll either be Wednesday or Thursday, but Morshed will let you know and send you the invitation. Okay, you're welcome. Have a lovely weekend, everybody. Oh, how can I ask if I'm not sure about a word? Yeah, well, let's go back and so if there's a word that you don't understand, you can just simply ask the examiner, you know, what does, and then the word that you heard or that you have read, you can ask them what it means, and they will explain it. And they may use a different word to explain the same kind of thing. So, for example, you might say, "What does climate mean? What does climate mean?" Okay, maybe you don't know the meaning of climate, and the examiner will say, "Well, it's a bit like weather." Okay, so you are allowed to ask for meanings on words. It doesn't happen a lot. I think you will find that the questions and the vocabulary in the first part are quite easy. Yeah, it's a synonym. That's right. So the examiner might use a synonym. So you're welcome. All right, guys, you have a lovely weekend. Yeah, sometimes by context. That's right. Okay. Yeah. All right, guys, have a lovely weekend. Okay, see you. Bye-bye.